Hello everyone to Homespun Quilts. I'm Thor and today we're going to work on a mechanical machine and looking at the balancing the drop-in bobbin tensions. So I've done a little test sew on this piece of fabric and let's take a look. The top stitches look nice and even, straight, but looking at the back I see something that's real typical is that we have railroading. That's where the top stitch is pulled down so far that it bumps out of the surface and you can feel little pops as you run your finger across it. Pop, 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 pop. So that's railroading. It shows that we have to balance the tensions from the top to the bottom. In fact, we have to reduce the tension on the bottom. But let's take another look here. If you want to really see how your tensions are balanced, what you can do, if your machine can do a zigzag, is run a zigzag stitch, just like you did. Let's see here. Switch to zigzag. There we go. Switch to zigzag. We just run a couple inches of zigzag stitches. When we take that out and look at the back, you can see that there's a lot of top thread. In this case, it's red. There's so much top thread coming out and being pulled to the back. So the bobbin thread is quite tight here and there's lots of top thread being pulled out. We'd like to see much less of that. So to reduce the tension of the bobbin, we have to pull the case out. So we will just take a screwdriver and loosen up the screws. In this case, there's one screw here. Get the needle up a little bit out of the way. Once you have the stitch plate off, you can see the bobbin sitting in there. I like to take out the bobbin itself. The cases come out in a couple different ways. This one, you simply lift it out. On some of them, there's a little device that kind of captures it a little bit. This little stopper right back here can have a little movement to it. Sometimes you can just put a screwdriver into a slot that's provided and turn it, and that'll move this out of the way if that's what keeping it from coming out. In this case, we just pull it out. And we can zoom in on here. The tension on a drop-in bobbin is developed by this spring that's held on the inside of the metal brace that's on the front side of this bobbin. There's a metal spring there. It's held in place by screws. In this case, there's two screws, a tiny screw on the right, and a little larger screw with a straight slot on it on the left. This is the tension adjustment screw. This screw holds the spring in place. We don't have to touch this at all to make our adjustments. It's just the screw on the left with a straight slot on it that adjusts the tension. I'm going to really focus on here. You can see that the screw right now is pointing at about 11 o'clock with the straight slot. I want to unscrew it to the left to reduce the tension. Lefty-loosey applies in this case. I'm pretty tight, so I'm going to make it like an 1/8 of a turn here and loosen that up. So now you can see instead of pointing up to 11 o'clock, it's pointing down here to like 9 o'clock. Let's see if that does the trick. We will thread it up, thread to the right, slide it into the notch under the spring, and we'll put this back in. Put our stitch plate back on. Let's get our bobbin in there. Springs in there. Our bobbin thread is coming out. Here we go. We'll put the screw back in. Kind of get it spun in a little bit. No need to snag it up tight for testing. Let's redo this zigzag stitch. There we go. There we go. Add a little extra thread. So the second stitch on the top looks great. Boy, we did a big adjustment, and there's a little reduction in the pull out, but it's still quite a bit there. So let's do it again. Pull off the plate. Having to go in and out is just a part of this process. On some of these, you're able to reach in with your screwdriver while everything's in place and make an adjustment. If you can actually see that screw that we're adjusting and can tell how far you've turned it, that's possible. Here we go. Again, we've got to pull out that bobbin. Okay. So let's adjust it from there back to here. These are really large adjustments I'm making. It was seriously out of whack. I'm going to take a look here. When I adjust my tensions on a drop-in bobbin, one little guideline I can use as I have it in my hand is that I'd like to have just like a very light amount of tension here. It's hard to gauge, but this is still pulling hard on it, so I'm going to loosen it some more. Coming around here, I've almost loosened it a whole turn here. Okay, now when I pull, it spins much easier. It's not really having to pull hard on it. Let's see if that made the difference we're looking for. Back in. Stitch plate is back here. Yep, can only go so far. Slide it in. Screw in. All right, let's do that zigzag again. There we go. Everything's feeling a lot better. It's not pulling as hard as it used to. So again, zigzag on top looks pretty good. Oh, I see a couple little defects here. It's really pulling on this. The top thread is now the one doing the pulling. You can see a little thing there. Most of it's looking pretty good. On the back, now I can see that we've gotten rid of all of the top thread showing. It's only bobbin thread except for a couple little spots here. It's much more close to our ideal. We're going to go back in, and we're going to tighten that screw just a little bit this time. My goal is to have no bobbin thread showing on the top and just a little bit of top thread showing on the bottom. Pulling to the bottom a little bit is great. So here it is again. Here's a straight screw. Focus in on that. So it's at the top, it's pointing about 1 o'clock. I'm going to take that back, and I'm going to screw it to the right and tighten it clockwise. And that's going from about 1 o'clock to about 2:30 or so there. That small amount is usually how much you have to adjust it. Usually these don't get too far out of whack. This one we had was pretty far out. We're really zeroing in on it now, though. Let's get our thread in there. This thread up here. Drop that screw in. I like to put the screw in, even though we're going in and out, just so that nothing catches and maybe makes this bobbin pop right out of place. Okay, here's a test. We've tightened up the bottom, so the top thread should be pulled down to the below. We want a little bit of bobbin thread on top. Still have that little bit of bottom thread there. Okay, making a little progress here. Still don't see a lot of top thread showing, just a little bit here at the beginning. So, I think one more time should do it. Believe me, going in and out to make an adjustment is not unusual on machines. We get really good about getting it done. So we're going to tighten this up. Again, right now, it's put in at about 230. The adjustment I made last time didn't make much of a change. So I'm going to go all the way to about 5 o'clock there. Let's see. There, yep. Of course, when we're getting close to the right space, the small adjustments can go make a big difference. So I should be, once I get very close to where we're going, I'll make some very small adjustments to zero in on what I would consider acceptable for sending the machine home. We want the stitch to look as good as it can. So I'm going to do this time is going to get these threads up. I haven't been doing that before, and that may be one reason why we get a change in the way they look from the start to the finish. So now I have both threads. Oops. I have both threads coming out, going to the side. I call this practicing good thread control. Having them there, having a finger on them to start. Let's do our zigzag. Pull this out. We're looking better on the top now. I don't have that big variation there in the middle. Again, this looks pretty good. I don't see anything showing on the top from the bottom. Looking at the back, here we are. This is exactly what I'm looking for in a zigzag stitch. You got bobbin making a good transition back and forth. I have a little bit of top thread showing on each side. This is actually a very good balance. A lot of times in a top thread, one side will be pulling harder than the other. I've seen manuals from the manufacturer that even show this effect of having more thread showing on the one side than the other. In this case, it is really well balanced side to side, and that little bit I'm seeing there looks to be just about right. So, because we're doing straight stitching in our project, generally, we're going to retest the straight stitch to see if we got rid of that railroading. Here we go. Go back to a straight stitch, same length. This is a very smooth machine. Pull it out. And again, we have and here's our final product. We have an excellent looking straight stitch here, very even stitches, very straight. On the back, I have exactly what I look for in a stitch, where I have just a touch of the top thread showing on each bottom stitch. I like to see the top thread showing so that demonstrate that it's pulling through the fabric, but it's not bumping out. The stitch is very smooth. And on top it is, I don't see any bobbin thread except maybe if I peek down the hole, I might see a little touch of the color. That's great. So at the beginning, I had it really pulled down on the back. It was really bumping up. You can see if I pulled it this way, you can actually see the ridges, the shadows of the hump of top thread popping out on the back of each one. We went from that to a really heavily pulled zigzag, went a little too far, had to bring the tension back up again. Now we have this nice small balance of thread on there, and the straight stitch is looking excellent on the back. That would look good on any quilt. And on the top, a very straight stitch. So thank you for sticking with me as I went through this process. Happy to help anybody out with their straight stitch bottom bobbin balancing, and we'll see you next time on another subject. So long, everybody.